HR should be there to represent the employees. They're their human resources. But from my experience, sadly enough, from my own experiences in this very studio as well, HR, there's nothing humane about human resources. They don't, 99% of the time, they don't represent the employees. They should. They know their job is to. But more often than not, they end up representing the company. And the boss is the company. They represent her or him. And as the expression goes, if the head of the fish stinks, and if the head of the company is a misogynistic, abusive piece of shit, then he is obviously not going to hire management staff that work under him that will challenge his behavior. So that head boss is in a particularly solid position in terms of being protected. And anybody who he hires is going to most likely fit into that ecosystem. And you could tell because they would all, on their lunch break, they would go out and smoke cigars together. And they would always hang out at each other's houses at night and have dinner with the missus and and meet the kids and smoke cigars and oogle each other's entertainment systems and come back at work the next day stinking of cigars and booze, half hungover, laughing about the night before. The shit was very common. And you can see that there was this divide between the bosses and the artists. It was like the elitist club, the golf club, they don't let anybody to touch their grass, right? That kind of thing. And I heard a lot of nightmarish stories. And these were stories that went through the whole department. This was like common knowledge that one of the directors, and I think I might have even spoken about this in the past, one of the directors was verbally abusive to this one particular artist who worked face to face with me. And he was verbally abusive to him all the time. And one day he had decided to stand up for himself and say, hey, knock it off. Because he would do it right in front of everybody. There was no candor to it. It was just right out there and start insulting him and making fun of him and humiliating him and all kinds of shit. Just basically using him as a verbal punching bag. And he stood up for himself. And the other guy walked right up to his nose, shoved him on the floor, right there on his ass, and looked at him with the calmest look on his face and said, do something about it. Right there in front of everybody. And apparently everybody in the studio they were all still working there, right? This had happened months before I started working there, but apparently they were all just sitting there going, what did I just see? And he's lying there on the ground. He said, he was laying on the ground for probably around 20 seconds in just a state of shock. He never knew that line. He never fathomed that line would get crossed. Furthermore, completely publicly, in front of the boss's face, his direct superior, everybody saw it. And he just did it. And he expected somebody to jump in and help him. But the juniors, the artists, were afraid to, and the management didn't give a fuck. And another thing I noticed, what I always found was very creepy in particular, especially at the beginning, was there was a secretary that our department was here, and right outside we had a glass wall, so we could see right out into the hallway, and out in the hallway we could see the secretary. And she also had a glass kind of office to her, so we could see into everybody else's office and let the light pass through the studio. And what I found particularly curious was, even though the entrance, the hallway to get past her, to get to our department, was in this direction, and her boss's office was here, it was kind of like the end, it was like the dead end, was the big head of the studio's office. Her desk was oriented towards his office, which is kind of bizarre because the door was behind her. So anybody walking in to meet the boss would be greeted by the secretary's back, which is, she's usually there to greet people when they walk in and set appointments and stuff like that. So why the hell was she faced back? We ended up actually getting along and becoming friends, and she ended up kind of confiding in me a little bit at a certain point when she started to trust me, which is also curious. Learning to trust me. Why would she need to do that, right? But once she started to feel a little bit more comfortable with me and that she could trust me, she started to divulge a lot of her insecurities about the job in general. She had been there for a couple of years already. She started to open up to me about how uncomfortable she was about the big boss, her direct superior. Because one of the things was, number one, The reason he oriented her desk towards him is because he had a glass wall. I couldn't see it from my vantage point. I could see it once I entered the office, once I went around and checked it out. But he oriented her desk towards her, and there was no back to the desk, so he could see straight under her desk. And she said, every single time I tried to cross my legs, because your legs go numb if you keep them crossed in a particular position, especially when you're doing it for 8 hours a day, his eyes would immediately glance over. He was waiting for an opportunity to be able to check it out. Not only that, he also dictated what she wore. He said, it's a gaming studio. We want to look a little bit more young and hip and stuff like that. So, you don't want to go with the long skirts and slacks. Some nice skirt would be really nice, and dress flatteringly. He would always have a comment to say whenever she wore less revealing clothing, longer skirts or looser clothing, which imagine, I want guys listening to put this to think about this for a sec, because guys don't get this. Imagine your boss walking up to you and saying, do you think you could wear shorter shorts? You look a little bit bummy. Why don't you wear shorter shorts? Or wear that tight shirt. You look really good in that tight shirt. How would you feel? Like, who the fuck do you think you are telling me what to wear? I mean, I'm dressed clean. I'm dressed professional. Leave me the fuck alone. Who are you to tell me? But women, you don't realize from a woman's perspective, particularly an attractive woman who's in this presentation spot where she's the face of the boss, what gives somebody a right to dictate a person's attire? Furthermore, very obviously dictating a more revealing, more upskirt type of attire, right? And that's exactly what he was doing. Not only that, but she was also oriented, so anybody who worked in a management position, all the art directors had offices around that same place and could also get a nice view underneath her desk as well. It used to make her feel terribly uncomfortable. And I said, well, have you ever spoken to him about it? Do you ever bring it up? She goes, yeah, dozens of times. I said, what does he have to say? He goes, no, it's better that way. And she said, well, I don't feel comfortable with people looking underneath my desk and staring at my skirt. And he go, yeah, no, but we prefer to have it in this direction, even though it was completely nonsensical to have it in that position in the first place. I eventually started to be abused myself, verbally, emotionally. They started to ridicule me, all these different types of things. And I had my artwork stolen right in front of my face, and I was verbally humiliated and insulted all the time by the same art director. Total piece of shit. And one day he pushed it too far with me, and I asked him after a meeting, after he had claimed all of the work I spent the last 6 months doing was his. I asked him privately to go into an office behind closed doors to be diplomatic about it, and I said, that's not cool. I don't know where you come off thinking that you can rip me off and steal my work. And not only that, I'm sick and tired of the way you're talking to me. I'd like you to speak. You're allowed to not like my face. You're allowed to critique my work. You're allowed to complain about my artistic standards. I'm perfectly cool with that. I'm a newbie. I'm a kid, but you have no business talking to me like that. Enough's enough. You're making it very uncomfortable for me. And he sat across the table. He looked at me right in the eyes and he said, Adam, you're the dumbest, most incompetent piece of shit I've ever had the displeasure of having to work with. And I don't know what the fuck you're talking about otherwise, so get out of my face. Okay? In other words, he basically said, I'm the boss, go fuck yourself. And if you don't like it, leave. So I went, And in my naivete, I went to the HR department on a November 6th. I know, because it was November 7th was my birthday. And on November 6th, I told HR about it. She looked at me very reassuringly with a very soft-spoken voice, and she said, thank you. It's a very reassuring, parental type of tone. I appreciate the fact that you went out of your way to tell me this, and I think you did the right thing. No, it's not right what happened to you. He has no business speaking to you like that. Also, he has no business stealing your work and claiming your work's yours. We all know you did it. Those are all your drawings. We've been watching you do it for the last 6 months. She said, thank you, and we're gonna deal with this right away. And she did her thing, and the next day they piled the work on me. It was my birthday, but whatever, They piled the work on me. They just, we need you to finish this, we need you to finish that, blah, blah, blah. And then at 4:30 p.m., can Adam Duff please come down to the Human Resources Department? Thank you. And I went to the Human Resources Department. She just said, you're sacked. Today's your last day. That's why you got me to do all that shit. because your art director wasn't good enough to do the art himself, so he needed me to do it so he could sack me. And I just looked at her with this kind of gobsmacked look of amazement and betrayal, and I went, and I got up. She looked a little nervous. She was afraid I was going to jump her. I didn't. I just turned around and walked out. And as I'm walking out, she says, I need your key card. And I just took my key card off and I flung it over the back. And I didn't even look back. I just walked right out. And I went in the elevator and that was it. Never looked back.